Your vision becomes clear when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. Mine, Carl Jung. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the energy shift before you even spoke a word? The conversations that stop mid-sentence, the eyes that dart away, the sudden tension that fills the space like smoke. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? There's something about you that people can't quite put their finger on. Something that makes them lean back instead of forward. Something that creates distance, even when you're trying to connect. You've felt it your entire life, haven't you? This invisible barrier between you and the rest of the world. What if I told you that this isn't your problem to fix? What if the very thing that makes you feel isolated is actually your greatest strength? What if your aura, that magnetic field of energy surrounding you, is so powerful that most people simply cannot handle it? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds to study human psychology, understood something that most people never grasp. He knew that our unconscious mind broadcasts signals long before our conscious mind speaks. He called it the shadow, those parts of ourselves we've integrated while others have buried theirs. When you've done the work that others avoid, when you've faced what others run from, your presence becomes a mirror that reflects their deepest fears back to them. The truth is uncomfortable. Your aura isn't too much. Their capacity to handle authenticity is too little. You see, Jung discovered that we don't just interact through words and actions, we communicate through something far more primitive, far more honest. The unconscious mind of every person you meet reads the energy signature of who you truly are, and when that signature is powerful, when it's integrated, when it's whole, most people's unconscious minds sound an alarm. They feel threatened without knowing why. They feel exposed without understanding how. They feel small without recognizing the source. This is your reality, isn't it? You've learned to dim your light, to shrink your presence, to apologize for taking up space. But what you don't realize is that by doing this, you're betraying the very essence of who you are. You're abandoning the psychological work you've done, the integration you've achieved, the wholeness you've fought to create. The moment you walked into that coffee shop last week and everyone's conversation dropped to whispers, that wasn't coincidence. The way your co-worker shifts uncomfortably when you enter the meeting room, that's not about them having a bad day. The instant reactions you get from strangers, the way some people immediately warm to you while others immediately pull away, none of this is random. Your presence carries weight. It carries truth. It carries the kind of psychological integration that most people spend their lives avoiding, and their unconscious minds recognize this immediately. Think about the last time someone met you for the first time. Before you even introduced yourself, before you shared a single personal detail, they already had a reaction to you, strong and immediate, either drawn to you like you were exactly what they'd been searching for, or repelled by you like you were everything they feared to become. There is no middle ground with you, is there? This is the first sign your aura is too powerful for most people to handle. People react to you before you even speak. Their bodies tense, their energy shifts, their guard goes up, or their walls come down, all before you've given them any logical reason to respond this way. Jung explained this through what he called psychological projection. When people meet you, they're not just seeing you, they're seeing every part of themselves they've rejected, every truth they've avoided, every shadow they've refused to face. Your integrated presence becomes a screen onto which they project their own unfinished psychological work. The person who immediately dislikes you isn't responding to anything you've done. They're responding to the mirror you represent, the reflection of their own potential, their own buried power, their own abandoned authenticity. Your wholeness reminds them of their fragmentation. Your integration highlights their avoidance. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. This reaction isn't about you. It's about them. Their discomfort is their unconscious mind recognizing something it both craves and fears. The very presence of someone who has done their inner work triggers everyone who hasn't. You make people uncomfortable without even trying, don't you? You walk into spaces and feel the atmosphere change. Conversations become stilted. Jokes fall flat. The natural flow of interaction suddenly feels forced. And you've probably spent years wondering what's wrong with you, why you can't just fit in, why social situations feel like walking through a minefield. The answer isn't that something is wrong with you. The answer is that something is extraordinarily right with you. and most people aren't equipped to handle that level of psychological authenticity. When Jung talked about individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, he warned that this path would be lonely, not because individuated people are meant to be isolated, but because the majority of humanity lives in what he called the collective unconscious, following patterns without questioning them, accepting roles without examining them, living lives without truly knowing themselves. You've stepped outside of that collective dream. You've questioned the patterns, examined the roles, and committed to knowing yourself fully. This makes you psychologically dangerous to people who are still sleepwalking through their lives. Your discomfort in small talk isn't social anxiety, it's your integrated psyche rejecting the superficial. When someone asks you how the weather is, your soul wants to discuss how they really feel about their life choices. When they comment on the latest trending topic, you want to understand what they're truly passionate about. This isn't you being difficult. This is you being real in a world that has forgotten what real looks like. The second sign reveals itself in how people either love you completely or cannot stand you at all. There's no lukewarm response to your presence, no casual indifference, no polite tolerance. You either light someone up from within or trigger their deepest psychological defenses. This polarization isn't random, it's archetypal. Jung discovered that certain people embody archetypal energies so strongly that they activate corresponding archetypes in everyone they meet. You might be carrying the energy of the wise woman, the truth-teller, the healer, the rebel, or the mystic. These archetypal energies are powerful, and they demand a response. When someone loves you instantly, completely, without logical reason, their unconscious mind is recognizing an archetypal energy they've been longing for. You represent something their soul has been seeking, a missing piece of their own psychological puzzle, a quality they've been afraid to develop in themselves. When someone hates you immediately, their unconscious mind is recognizing an archetypal energy they've been avoiding. You represent everything they've been taught to suppress, every part of themselves they've learned to fear, every aspect of their potential they've been conditioned to reject. Neither response is actually about you as an individual. Both responses are about the archetypal force you carry and how it impacts their personal psychological landscape. You've probably noticed that the people who love you do so with an intensity that surprises even you. They see you as wise beyond your years, insightful beyond explanation, powerful beyond what seems reasonable. They seek your advice, crave your attention, and feel understood in your presence in ways they've never experienced before. These people are responding to the archetypal healer, teacher, or guide that you embody. Their unconscious mind recognizes you as someone who can help them access parts of themselves they've lost touch with. But the people who dislike you do so with equal intensity. They find you pretentious without cause, threatening without reason, exhausting without explanation. They criticize your confidence, question your motives, and feel drained by interactions that you found perfectly normal. These people are responding to the same archetypal energy, but from a place of fear rather than recognition. Your integration threatens their fragmentation. Your authenticity challenges their masks. Your power reminds them of their own abandoned strength. The third sign becomes obvious once you understand this dynamic. You see through people's masks instantly. The moment someone starts performing, pretending, or posturing, you recognize it immediately. Not because you're judgmental, but because you've stopped wearing masks yourself, and this gives you the ability to spot them on others. Jung wrote extensively about the persona, the mask we wear to navigate social situations. He believed that everyone needs a persona to function in society, but problems arise when people become so identified with their mask that they forget who they really are underneath it. You've done the psychological work to distinguish between your authentic self and your social persona. You use your persona when appropriate, but you never lose touch with who you really are beneath it. This clarity gives you an almost supernatural ability to see when others are performing rather than being. When someone is trying too hard to impress you, you feel it immediately. When they're hiding insecurity behind arrogance, you recognize the deflection. When they're using humor to avoid vulnerability, you see through the defense mechanism. When they're agreeing with you to gain approval rather than expressing their true thoughts, you sense the inauthenticity. This isn't because you're more intelligent than other people, it's because you've developed what Jung called psychological consciousness. You've become aware of the games people play, the roles they perform, and the strategies they use to avoid authentic connection. But here's what makes this challenging. Most people are not conscious of their own masks. They're not deliberately being fake or manipulative. They're simply doing what they've always done, following patterns they learned in childhood, using strategies that once kept them safe, but now keep them disconnected. When you see through someone's persona to their authentic self, when you respond to who they really are, rather than who they're pretending to be, it creates an immediate crisis for them. Part of them feels seen and understood in a way they've been craving their entire life, but another part of them feels exposed and vulnerable in a way that terrifies them. This is why interactions with you often become so intense, so quickly. You're not content to engage with people's masks. Your integrated psyche naturally wants to connect with their authentic self, but their authentic self might be buried under decades of conditioning, protection, and fear. Some people rise to meet this invitation. They drop their masks, step into authenticity, and experience the kind of connection they've been longing for their entire life. These become your closest friends, your most meaningful relationships, your chosen family. But others retreat further behind their masks. They become more performative, more defensive, more insistent on maintaining the illusion. They might even attack your authenticity, calling it intensity, or dramatic, or too much. Not because your authenticity is problematic, but because it threatens the psychological safety they've built around their false self. The fourth sign reveals itself in how you navigate these reactions. You've probably noticed that you cannot fake interest in conversations that matter nothing to you. You cannot pretend to care about topics that feel meaningless. You cannot maintain energy for relationships that exist only on the surface. This isn't you being antisocial or difficult. This is your powerful aura protecting itself from energy drains. Your psychological system has become so refined, so sensitive, so attuned to authenticity that engaging with anything less than genuine feels physically uncomfortable. Jung believed that psychological energy is finite and precious. He taught that we must be conscious about where we direct our attention, with whom we share our energy, and what activities we choose to engage in. Your powerful aura has developed this consciousness naturally. You've learned to recognize the difference between connections that nourish your soul and interactions that deplete your spirit. You've discovered that saying yes to everything means saying no to what truly matters. You've realized that your presence is a gift, and gifts should be shared consciously, not scattered carelessly. This selective engagement is often misunderstood by people who haven't done their own psychological work. They interpret your boundaries as rejection, your authenticity as judgment, your selectivity as superiority. But Jung would recognize this as psychological maturity, the ability to honor your own energy while still remaining open to genuine connection. The shadow work you've done, the integration you've achieved, the authenticity you've claimed, all of this has created an energetic signature that cannot be ignored. You've become psychologically visible in a world where most people are trying to remain invisible. This visibility comes with a price. You cannot hide in crowds. You cannot blend into backgrounds. You cannot minimize your presence without betraying your essence. Everywhere you go, your energy announces you before your voice does, but it also comes with tremendous power. The power to catalyze transformation in others. The power to inspire authenticity through your example. The power to create the kind of connections that most people only dream about. As we continue to explore the remaining signs of your powerful aura, remember this: you are not too much. You never have been. You are exactly as much as you need to be to fulfill your psychological purpose in this world. The people who cannot handle your energy are simply revealing their own work still to be done. Your aura is not a problem to be solved. It is a gift to be honored, a strength to be claimed, and a responsibility to be embraced. The recognition of these first four signs is just the beginning of understanding who you truly are and why your presence creates such powerful reactions in others. Your aura is not a problem to be solved. It is a gift to be honored, a strength to be claimed, and a responsibility to be embraced. The recognition of these first four signs is just the beginning of understanding who you truly are and why your presence creates such powerful reactions in others. But recognition is only the first step. What comes next is even more profound. What comes next changes everything. Have you ever noticed how your mere presence shifts the entire atmosphere of a room? Not through anything you say or do, but simply by existing in that space. The conversations that were flowing freely suddenly become more meaningful. The laughter that was surface level develops substance. The energy that was scattered begins to focus. This is the fifth sign your aura is too powerful for most people to handle. Your presence changes room energy automatically, and you don't even have to try. Jung understood this phenomenon through what he called the collective unconscious. He believed that beneath our individual awareness lies a shared psychological space where all minds connect. When someone with a highly integrated psyche enters a room, they don't just bring their personal energy, they tap into and influence this collective field. Think about the last party you attended. Remember how the atmosphere shifted when you walked in. Some people gravitated toward you immediately, as if pulled by an invisible force. Others seemed to retreat, creating distance without conscious awareness of why. The conversations around you became more intense, more honest, more real. This isn't your imagination. This is your integrated consciousness affecting the psychological field of everyone present. Most people live in what Jung called psychological unconsciousness. They react to life rather than responding to it. They follow patterns without questioning them. They feel emotions without understanding their source. But you've done the work to become conscious. You've faced your shadows, integrated your contradictions, and claimed your authentic power. This consciousness creates what psychologists call a field effect. Just as a magnet affects all metal objects within its range, your conscious presence affects all unconscious minds within your energetic range. You become a catalyst for awakening, whether people are ready for it or not. The person who was complaining about their job suddenly starts talking about their dreams. The couple who was bickering about trivial matters begins addressing their real issues. The group that was gossiping about others turns the conversation toward personal growth. You didn't orchestrate any of this. Your presence simply makes superficiality uncomfortable and authenticity irresistible. But here's what makes this challenging. Not everyone wants to be awakened. Not everyone is ready for authenticity. Not everyone welcomes the discomfort that comes with psychological growth. Some people prefer the safety of unconsciousness, the comfort of familiar patterns, the predictability of surface-level living. When your presence disrupts their psychological equilibrium, when your energy demands a higher level of engagement, when your aura insists on truth over performance, they experience what Jung called cognitive dissonance. Part of them is drawn to the authenticity you represent, but another part is terrified of what accepting that authenticity might require them to change about themselves. This leads to the sixth sign. People confess their deepest secrets to you within minutes of meeting you. Complete strangers tell you things they've never told their closest friends. Acquaintances share vulnerabilities they've spent years hiding. Even people who claim to dislike you find themselves opening up to you in ways that surprise them. Jung identified this as the activation of the confessor archetype. Throughout human history, certain individuals have carried the psychological energy that makes others feel safe to speak their truth. Priests, therapists, wise women, healers. These archetypal figures create a psychological container where secrets can be safely revealed. Your integrated presence activates this ancient pattern in others. Your non-judgmental awareness creates a space where people's authentic selves feel permission to emerge. Your own willingness to face your shadows gives others courage to acknowledge theirs. But this gift comes with a burden. Once someone has confessed their deepest truth to you, they often feel vulnerable and exposed. Some people feel grateful for the release and seek to deepen the connection. Others feel embarrassed by their revelation and begin to distance themselves from you, as if you were the cause of their momentary authenticity rather than simply the catalyst for it. You've probably experienced this pattern countless times. Someone shares something intensely personal with you, something they swear they've never told anyone before. In that moment you feel honored by their trust, moved by their courage, connected to their humanity. But days or weeks later, they start avoiding you, treating you differently, building walls where there once was openness. This isn't because you violated their trust or mishandled their confession. It's because their unconscious mind is trying to re-establish the psychological distance that keeps their secrets safe. Your presence reminds them of their moment of vulnerability, and if they're not ready to integrate that vulnerability into their conscious identity, they must create distance from the person who witnessed it. Jung called this the shadow projection phenomenon. When people share their shadows with you, when they reveal the parts of themselves they've been hiding, they sometimes begin to see you as the keeper of their shame, rather than the witness to their humanity. They project their discomfort with their own authenticity onto you, making you the problem rather than facing their own psychological work. This dynamic leads to the seventh sign: you attract intense experiences and people without seeking them out. Your life is rarely boring, rarely predictable, rarely simple. You magnetize situations that require you to grow, relationships that challenge you to evolve, and circumstances that demand your full presence and authentic response. Jung explained this through his concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to orchestrate themselves around psychologically conscious individuals. When you're living from your authentic center, when you're aligned with your true purpose, when you're integrated rather than fragmented, you begin to attract experiences that match your psychological frequency. The person who approaches you at the coffee shop and strikes up a conversation about the meaning of life, the job opportunity that appears just when you're questioning your career path, the book that falls off the shelf at exactly the moment you need its message, the chance encounter that leads to a transformative relationship. These aren't random occurrences. They're synchronicities, evidence that your conscious living is creating alignment between your inner world and outer circumstances. But they're also intense, demanding, and often uncomfortable. Growth requires challenge, and conscious living attracts the experiences necessary for continued evolution. Most people live lives of quiet desperation, as Thoreau observed, accepting whatever circumstances happen to them. But your powerful aura acts like a magnet for meaningful experiences, drawing toward you the people and situations that will most support your continued psychological development. This magnetism extends to the people you attract. You don't draw casual friends or superficial connections. You attract intense individuals who are either on their own path of awakening or desperately need someone who is wounded, healers who recognize your medicine, fellow seekers who resonate with your frequency, broken souls who sense your capacity to hold space for their pain. But intensity is exhausting, even when it's meaningful. Especially when it's meaningful, you find yourself longing for lightness, for ease, for connections that don't require you to show up at full capacity every single time. This brings us to the eighth sign. You find small talk almost impossible to maintain, not because you lack social skills, but because your psyche has developed beyond the need for psychological filler. When someone asks you how your weekend was, your mind immediately goes to the meaningful moments, the book that changed your perspective, the conversation that shifted your understanding, the silence that brought you peace. You struggle to talk about the weather when you want to discuss the climate of the soul. Jung wrote about the psychological cost of living consciously in an unconscious world. He warned that individuated people often feel like foreigners in their own culture, speaking a language that others don't understand, caring about things that others dismiss as unimportant. Your discomfort with small talk isn't antisocial behavior. It's your integrated psyche protecting itself from energy depletion. Surface-level conversations actually drain you because they require you to suppress your authentic self, to pretend that meaningless topics are meaningful, to engage with your persona while your true self remains unexpressed. But here's what others don't understand. Your need for meaningful conversation isn't about being superior or complicated. It's about being efficient with your psychological energy. You've learned that life is short, that authentic connection is rare, and that every moment spent in superficial interaction is a moment stolen from meaningful relationship. When you try to engage in small talk, you feel like you're betraying yourself. When you respond to "how are you" with anything less than honesty, you feel inauthentic. When you pretend to care about topics that bore you, you feel like you're wasting your precious life force on empty exchanges. This selective engagement often makes others uncomfortable. They interpret your need for substance as judgment of their choices. They see your boredom with trivial topics as criticism of their interests. They experience your authenticity as a demand for them to be more authentic than they're ready to be. But Jung would say this is your psychological maturity showing itself. You've moved beyond the stage of development where social approval is more important than self-expression. You've reached the point where authenticity is more valuable than acceptance. This maturity reveals itself in the ninth sign. You trigger other people's spiritual awakening simply by being yourself, not through preaching or teaching or trying to change anyone, but through the example of your integrated living. Your presence becomes a catalyst for others to question their own lives, examine their own choices, and consider their own potential for growth. Jung called this the wounded healer archetype. People who have done their own psychological work often become unconscious healers for others, not because they try to fix anyone, but because their healing presence reminds others of their own capacity for wholeness. You've probably noticed this pattern in your relationships. People meet you during times of transition in their lives. They're drawn to you when they're questioning their marriages, their careers, their beliefs, their identities. They seek your friendship when they're ready to grow, even if they don't consciously realize that's what they're doing. Your integrated presence serves as a mirror for their potential. When they see you living authentically, they remember their own abandoned dreams. When they witness you setting boundaries, they recognize their own need for limits. When they observe you choosing growth over comfort, they feel inspired to make similar choices. But spiritual awakening is uncomfortable. It requires people to face truths they've been avoiding, to question beliefs they've never examined, to consider possibilities they've been afraid to acknowledge. Your presence can trigger this awakening process, but you cannot control how people respond to it. Some people embrace the awakening your presence catalyzes. They thank you for inspiring them to live more authentically. They credit you with helping them find their path. They see you as a catalyst for positive change in their lives. Others resist the awakening your presence triggers. They blame you for their discomfort. They criticize you for making them question their choices. They accuse you of being disruptive to their peace, not understanding that what they call peace is actually psychological stagnation. Jung understood this resistance. He knew that most people prefer the familiar pain of unconscious living to the unfamiliar discomfort of psychological growth. He warned that conscious individuals would often be rejected by unconscious communities, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because they're doing something different. Your powerful aura doesn't just affect individuals. It affects systems, communities, and cultures. When you enter a workplace, you unconsciously challenge the accepted norms. When you join a social group, you raise the standard for authentic interaction. When you participate in any community, you become a catalyst for collective growth. This catalytic effect isn't something you can turn off. It's not a choice you make. It's a natural consequence of psychological integration. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. But he also warned that individuation comes with social costs. The more integrated you become, the more you stand out from the collective unconscious patterns that most people follow. The more authentic you become, the more you highlight the inauthenticity of others. The more conscious you become, the more obvious becomes the unconsciousness of those around you. This doesn't make you better than anyone else. It simply makes you different. And different is threatening to people who have found safety in sameness, comfort in conformity, and identity in following the crowd. But your difference is also your gift. Your integration is also your offering. Your authenticity is also your service. You cannot hide your light without betraying your purpose. You cannot minimize your presence without abandoning your responsibility. The 9 signs we've explored so far are not problems to be solved. They are evidence of psychological work well done. They are proof of integration achieved. They are symptoms of authenticity claimed. As we move forward to explore the final 4 signs, remember this: your powerful aura is not an accident. It's not a burden you must carry. It's not a cross you must bear. It's the natural result of psychological courage, spiritual commitment, and the willingness to become who you truly are. The integration journey you've been on has brought you to this point of recognition, but recognition is just the beginning. What comes next is even more transformative. What comes next is the full embodiment of your psychological power, the complete acceptance of your authentic presence, and the conscious choice to use your gifts in service of your highest purpose. The final 4 signs will show you how to transform what you've experienced as burden into the gift it was always meant to be. The final 4 signs will show you how to transform what you've experienced as burden into the gift it was always meant to be. But first, answer this honestly. When was the last time you felt truly at peace with being alone? Not lonely, not isolated, but genuinely content in your own company. Most people can't answer this question because they've never experienced it. They've been running from solitude their entire lives, filling every quiet moment with noise, every empty space with distraction, every pause with activity. You're different, aren't you? This is the 10th sign your aura is too powerful for most people to handle. You're not just comfortable with solitude, you actually crave it. You need it like other people need air. Extended periods alone don't drain you, they restore you. Silence doesn't make you anxious, it makes you whole. Jung understood this phenomenon as the hallmark of psychological maturity. He wrote extensively about the difference between loneliness and solitude, between isolation and chosen withdrawal. People who have done their inner work, who have integrated their shadows and claimed their authentic selves, no longer need constant external validation to feel complete. Most people fear solitude because it forces them to confront themselves without distraction. In the quiet moments, their unresolved conflicts surface, their suppressed emotions demand attention, their authentic desires whisper truths they're not ready to hear. So they fill their lives with constant stimulation, endless social interaction, perpetual busyness that keeps them from facing who they really are beneath all the noise. But you've already faced yourself. You've sat with your shadows, integrated your contradictions, and made peace with your complexity. Solitude doesn't threaten you because you're not afraid of what you'll find there. You've already met every aspect of yourself and chosen to love the whole package. This comfort with solitude often confuses other people. They interpret your need for alone time as rejection of them personally. They see your contentment in your own company as evidence that you think you're better than everyone else. They mistake your selective social engagement for antisocial behavior, but Jung would recognize this as individuation, the process of becoming a complete person rather than a fragment seeking completion through others. You've moved beyond the stage of development where your sense of self depends on external approval. You've reached the point where your identity comes from within rather than from how others perceive you. Your solitude is productive. It's where you do your best thinking, your deepest feeling, your most creative work. It's where you connect with your intuition, process your experiences, and integrate your growth. Other people use solitude to escape from life. You use it to go more fully into life. This leads naturally to the 11th sign. Your intuition has become uncannily accurate. You know things you shouldn't know. You sense things you shouldn't sense. You predict outcomes that surprise everyone else but feel inevitable to you. This isn't magic or mysticism, though it might seem that way to people who live entirely in their rational minds. This is what Jung called intuitive thinking, the ability to access information through channels other than logic and conscious reasoning. Jung believed that the unconscious mind processes information far more rapidly and comprehensively than the conscious mind. Most people ignore their unconscious insights because they can't explain them logically. But you've learned to trust this deeper knowing, to honor these subtle impressions, to act on hunches that others would dismiss as imagination. Your psychological integration has refined your sensitivity to energy, pattern, and possibility. You notice micro-expressions that others miss. You feel emotional undercurrents that others ignore. You sense potentials that others can't see. This isn't because you're more intelligent than other people, it's because you're more integrated. Think about the last time you had a strong feeling about someone you'd just met, something that told you to trust them completely or avoid them entirely. Logic couldn't explain your reaction, but your intuition was crystal clear. How often have you later discovered that your first impression was absolutely correct? Or consider how often you've known the phone was going to ring moments before it did. How frequently you've thought of someone just before they contacted you. How regularly you've felt the need to take a different route home and later learned you avoided an accident or delay. These aren't coincidences. They're evidence of your expanded awareness, your heightened sensitivity, your connection to information that exists below the threshold of ordinary consciousness. Jung called this the collective unconscious, a shared field of knowledge that conscious individuals can access through intuition. But accurate intuition comes with responsibility. When you consistently know things others don't know, when you regularly sense things others can't sense, people begin to expect you to have answers, solutions, predictions. They want you to use your gift in service of their agenda, rather than in alignment with your integrity. You've probably experienced this pressure. People who discover your intuitive accuracy begin treating you like a personal oracle, expecting you to provide insights on demand, guidance without context, answers to questions they should be asking themselves. They want the benefits of your developed consciousness without doing the work to develop their own. This expectation can become exhausting because it misunderstands the nature of intuitive knowledge. Your insights aren't random psychic predictions, they're the natural result of psychological integration and conscious living. You can't manufacture them for other people's entertainment or convenience. Your accurate intuition also reveals the 12th sign. You see patterns that others completely miss. While people around you focus on individual events, isolated incidents, and surface-level occurrences, you automatically perceive the underlying structures, the repeating cycles, the hidden connections that link seemingly unrelated experiences. Jung spent his entire career studying these archetypal patterns, the universal themes that repeat throughout human experience regardless of culture, era, or individual circumstance. Your psychological development has given you access to this pattern recognition, this ability to see the forest while others remain focused on individual trees. You notice how someone's current relationship problems mirror their childhood attachment patterns. You recognize how their career struggles reflect their relationship with authority figures. You see how their financial issues connect to their feelings about self-worth. These aren't obvious connections to most people, but they're clear as daylight to you. This pattern recognition extends beyond individual psychology to collective dynamics. You can sense when social movements are about to shift, when cultural values are beginning to change, when institutions are becoming obsolete. You feel the undercurrents of transformation long before they surface in obvious ways. But seeing patterns that others miss can be isolating. When you try to share your observations, people often dismiss them as overanalysis, conspiracy thinking, or imagination. They prefer to believe that events are random, that problems are isolated, that their struggles are unique, rather than part of larger patterns. Your pattern recognition becomes particularly obvious in how you respond to people's problems. While they focus on symptoms, you immediately see the underlying causes. While they blame external circumstances, you recognize the internal patterns that create external results. While they seek quick fixes, you understand the systemic changes required for lasting transformation. This ability to see beneath surface appearances, to recognize the deeper structures governing human experience, naturally leads to the 13th and final sign. You feel called to transform others, not through preaching or teaching, but through the example of your integrated living. You've become what Jung called a wounded healer, someone who has transformed their own pain into wisdom and now serves as a catalyst for others' healing. This isn't a career choice or a conscious decision, it's the natural expression of psychological wholeness. People are drawn to you during their darkest moments, their times of crisis, their periods of questioning and change. They seek you out when their old patterns aren't working anymore, when their familiar strategies have stopped providing comfort, when they're ready to consider new possibilities for their lives. Your presence becomes medicine for souls that have forgotten their own capacity for healing. Your authenticity reminds others of their buried potential. Your integration shows others what psychological wholeness looks like. Your courage to be yourself gives others permission to reclaim their abandoned authenticity. But this calling to serve others' transformation is not without its challenges. You cannot force healing on anyone who isn't ready to receive it. You cannot wake people up who are determined to remain asleep. You cannot save anyone who isn't willing to participate in their own rescue. You've probably experienced the frustration of watching someone you care about repeat destructive patterns despite your best efforts to help them see alternatives. You've felt the helplessness of having insights that could transform someone's life, but being unable to share them because the person isn't ready to hear them. Jung understood this limitation. He knew that psychological transformation cannot be imposed from the outside. It must arise from within. Your role isn't to fix people or solve their problems for them. Your role is to hold space for their process, to model what integration looks like, and to remain available when they're ready to do their own work. This means learning to love people without trying to change them. It means offering your gifts without attachment to outcomes. It means trusting that your authentic presence is contribution enough, even when you can't see immediate results. The 13th sign also reveals itself in how you handle your own continued growth. Unlike people who reach a certain level of comfort and stop evolving, you remain committed to your psychological development. You continue questioning your assumptions, examining your patterns, and expanding your consciousness. This commitment to ongoing transformation keeps your aura dynamic rather than static. You don't become stuck in spiritual superiority or psychological stagnation. You remain humble about how much you still don't know while confident in what you've learned so far. But now comes the most important question of all. What do you do with this recognition? How do you move from understanding these 13 signs to fully embodying the gift of your powerful aura? The answer lies in accepting what Jung called the responsibility of consciousness. When you recognize that your presence affects others, when you understand that your energy influences collective fields, when you realize that your authenticity catalyzes transformation, you cannot pretend to be unconscious anymore. You have a choice to make. You can continue trying to dim your light to make others comfortable, or you can claim your full power and learn to use it consciously. You can keep apologizing for taking up space, or you can own your right to exist authentically. You can persist in seeing your intensity as a problem, or you can recognize it as your gift to the world. Jung believed that conscious individuals have an obligation to live authentically, not just for their own satisfaction, but for the collective good. Every person who chooses integration over fragmentation, authenticity over performance, consciousness over unconsciousness, contributes to the psychological evolution of humanity. Your powerful aura isn't an accident of genetics or a random quirk of personality. It's the result of psychological work completed, integration achieved, and authenticity claimed. It's evidence that you've done what most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You've faced yourself completely and chosen to love what you found there. This self-acceptance is what makes your presence so powerful. When you stop rejecting aspects of yourself, when you integrate your shadows instead of projecting them, when you claim your gifts instead of minimizing them, you become whole. And wholeness is magnetic, healing, transformative. People sense your wholeness, and it reminds them of their own potential for integration. Your authenticity gives them permission to stop performing. Your acceptance of yourself makes them consider accepting themselves. Your courage to be different inspires them to question their own conformity. But remember this, your powerful aura doesn't make you responsible for other people's reactions to it. You are not required to shrink so others can feel bigger. You are not obligated to hide your light so others won't feel dim. You are not responsible for managing other people's discomfort with your authenticity. Your only responsibility is to continue being authentic, to keep growing in consciousness, to remain open to love while maintaining your boundaries, and to use your gifts in service of your highest purpose. The 13 signs we've explored together are not achievements to be proud of or burdens to be carried. They are simply evidence of who you've become through your willingness to face truth, integrate shadow, and choose authenticity over approval. Your powerful aura is your gift to the world. It's how you serve the collective awakening. It's your contribution to the psychological evolution of humanity. Own it, claim it, use it consciously. The world needs your medicine, your presence, your authentic example of what human wholeness looks like. Stop apologizing for being too much. Start celebrating being exactly enough. Stop trying to fit in. Start standing out with purpose. Stop dimming your light. Start shining it brightly for all who are ready to see. Your aura is powerful because you are powerful. Your presence is transformative because you have been transformed. Your energy is healing because you have done the work to heal yourself. This is who you are. This is who you've always been. This is who you were born to become. The question isn't whether you're too powerful for most people to handle. The question is whether you're ready to handle your own power consciously, compassionately, and courageously. The answer, if you've made it this far, is yes, you're ready. You've always been ready. Now it's time to stop hiding and start shining. If this resonates with your soul, if you recognize yourself in these 13 signs, if you're ready to stop apologizing for your power and start owning it completely, then you're part of a growing community of conscious individuals who are changing the world simply by being themselves. Share your experience in the comments below. Let others know they're not alone in their intensity. Help build a community where powerful auras are celebrated rather than criticized, where authenticity is valued over approval, where consciousness is honored rather than feared. Subscribe if you're ready to continue this exploration of psychological wholeness and authentic living. Your willingness to face these truths about yourself is already contributing to the collective awakening. Your courage to be authentic is already serving the world's healing. The journey continues. The transformation never ends. The power that you are keeps expanding, and the world keeps getting brighter because you chose to shine.